So in a previous video, we showed what you want to do to make sure that your Photoshop file is well prepared for importing into After Effects, which we're going to now do. But I thought I'd just review. I added a few things I made. I'm going to be adding some blood splatter to this animation. So I made versions of this arm that involve already pre-built with blood on them. Yay! And I also, for the sake of showing how to parent one asset to another, I actually separated the arm and the scythe so I can show them parented. So we're going to use that in here. But so for the sake of preparation, you also can have additional assets that aren't visible, and in After Effects they'll not be visible. So there's other assets here that I'm not going to use right away, so I'm not going to make them visible. All right, so they're going to, oh, and I should fix these. This is the white background, and this is the red background. All right, so in After Effects, let's actually start over. When you're launching After Effects, hopefully it won't take too long, and it may prompt you to start a new project. You can just ignore this because it's going to ask you for all these settings that you're not going to necessarily be sure of in this beginning. And instead, we're just going to say File, Import File. And we'll look at what different areas are. And we're going to choose the file that you've prepared. And what's important is that we want to make sure that we retain the layer sizes, all right, and we want to make sure that they're editable layers, okay, and we hit OK. And you can see now in this project area we have, it describes the pixel dimensions. It has here what's a sequence, and then it has every layer is a separate file now, all right, that can be used. But for the sake of this, what we're going to want to do is we open this sequence, and automatically, and I can zoom in and out, and I'm using shortcuts, I'm using my trackpad. You can see the ones that were visible, and the ones that were not visible are not visible now as again, all right. So it remembers which layers you made visible and not visible. And as I select each layer, all right, it puts the little selection around them. So that's the corn and kids in the background, the scythe by itself, the arm and fist by itself, the logo, and we can turn any of them on and off now. Okay, so we can turn the side on and off. And so these are some of the basic. These are very. The idea is as you're working on a layer within a sequence, you can select it just like you would in Photoshop. All right. Now, one of the first things we want to do is just look at the settings, and because you're going to look at with this Photoshop file, it has the width, the pixel width and pixel height. It also sets a frame rate at 30. You can change this if you want to work with like more of a film frame rate at 24, or if you want to do some sort of, you can do a 60 frames per second. It's going to make your files bigger, but 30 is fine. That's standard video. And right now, its default size length is 3 seconds. So remember, this is in frames, seconds, minutes, hours. All right, so this is 3 frames in 0 seconds. So if you wish to change the length of the project, you need to change the composition settings, which could end up being shorter rather than longer. So for now, 3 seconds is fine. In the timeline here of a sequence, you can note the position of the playhead. All right, it tells you how far along. So we're 11 frames in. All right, so we're just kind of touring the interface a little bit, and this is across the full 3 seconds, which ends because it starts at 0. It's going to end on 2 seconds 29 frames because the 0 frame counts as 1/30th of a second. All right. We can resize the the sequence. So now that as we're moving across, we're only going to get to within this space. It only goes to basically 24, 25 frames. And as we move across, and this is so you can look, inspect more closely time frames as you're working with them. All right. Each layer you can change the length of any of these layers. So let's say, for example, we want Adult Nightmare, right, to not be visible at first. So we can turn it off, so now you don't see it for this period of time until we see it, right? So at any given point in time, we can change the visibility of something, of a layer, right? You can see it's disappearing and appearing. And then once you've set that space, you can move it around, okay? We also can, let's zoom in on that. And I'm using my spacebar keyboard shortcut to get the rubber hand to move things around. So you can see that more closely. Now you also can use the turn arrow down so you can see attributes. All right, these are the basic attributes of a layer before you make any of. We have its position. So if I move it around, you can see I'm changing the position. If I grab a corner and resize it, you can see that the scale is now changing. So notice the scale is changing. If I switch tools, right now I'm in the selection tool, and I switch to the rotation tool, I can rotate it, and you can see that that also can change. All right, and then finally we can change the opacity, so it's 0%. So even though I'm within the area of which that layer is active, you can't see it because it's at 0%, but you can change your opacity. All right, and then the last thing to note is that all of these attributes can change over time by setting what we call keyframes. And keyframes are what are very, very powerful. The powerful feature of After Effects is we can set, say, this opacity to 0. All right, and then I click this little timer button, which is to say I'm making a keyframe, and now, and you can see there's this little dot here, and if I move this over and I change the opacity to 100, it set another keyframe, and across it automatically, so note that opacity changing as I scan this space. It starts at 0, and as I advance, every frame is about 8 to 8.5 percentage points of opacity until we get to 100. All right, and so I can just hit the spacebar to play, and we can see that it fades in. So this is how you accomplish a fade in, is by taking the opacity, starting at 1 point, 0, making a keyframe at 0, and then picking a point in time later to make it 100%. All right, so that's enough for this first one. I'm going to stop there.